For 10,000 years, the Athelian ascendancy has brought order to the stars. Their rule is absolute. Their fleets are invincible. Their edict is law. They discover a new world, a primitive, chaotic sphere of warring tribes, a species called human. They deliver the ultimatum, the same one offered to 1,000 worlds before: ascend to our order or be erased. But what happens when the primitives, for the first time in 10 millennia, say no? What happens when a species forged in constant, brutal warfare is finally given a single, common enemy? And what horrors are discovered in their history that could make a decorated Athelian general plead for peace? The Galactic Empire declared war until an alien general spoke of the horrors of humanity. Before the ascension begins, subscribe to the channel for the complete Imperial archives and strike the like button to fortify our position. Alright, let's begin the story. High Emissary Kaelin stood on the crystalline bridge of the Celestial Edict, her four multifaceted eyes gazing upon the blue and white world suspended in the void. For an emissary of the Athelian ascendancy, a 10,000-year-old empire of 12,000 star systems, this was a routine, almost tedious, assignment. Another primitive world, another simple choice for its nascent inhabitants: ascension or purification. Report, she chimed, her voice a series of perfectly modulated tones that resonated with the authority of her ancient lineage. Her sub-emissary, a younger Athelian whose carapace still shone with the polish of the academy, bowed low. The primitives call themselves humans, High Emissary. Technologically, they are pre-ascendant. Class G. Our deep-range probes confirm they still utilize chemical rockets for orbital transit and rely on fission-based weaponry as their ultimate deterrent. Fission, Kaelin mused, the thought projecting a faint shimmer of condescension. We abandoned such crude, chaotic energies 9 millennia ago, after they scarred the first 100 worlds of our empire. These beings are infants, playing with loaded weapons in their crib. Indeed, High Emissary, the sub-emissary agreed. Our long-range scans of their primitive information networks confirm their chaotic nature. They are a species perpetually at war with itself. Our xenologists have cataloged over 14,000 distinct, organized conflicts in their short, bloody history. They cannot even agree on the governance of their own single planet. Kaelin felt a familiar, sterile sense of pity mixed with profound contempt. It was always the same story. Young, violent species, squabbling in their planetary cradle, utterly unaware of the true, ordered cosmos that awaited them. Their constant conflict was a symptom of their spiritual sickness, a sickness the ascendancy was duty-bound to cure. They are ready for the Edict of Ascension, Kaelin declared, her decision as swift and final as a dying star. Open a channel. Broadcast on all their frequencies. Let us offer them the divine gift of order. Across Earth, the message arrived. It was not a communication, it was an imposition. It sliced through every firewall, appeared on every screen, sounded from every speaker. It was delivered in every human language and dialect simultaneously, a flawless, unnerving display of technological dominance. People of Earth, I am High Emissary Kaelin of the Athelian ascendancy. Your world has been observed, judged, and chosen for ascension into our eternal empire. Your governments will be dissolved. Your militaries will be disbanded. Your people will serve the greater order. You have one of your solar cycles to prepare for a peaceful transition. Cooperate, and you will know a prosperity and peace your species has never conceived. Resist, and you will be purified. In the Global Defense Council bunker, buried a mile beneath Cheyenne Mountain, Admiral Jax Thorne listened to the broadcast, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of the central command table. Purified, he repeated, his voice dangerously low. Is that what they're calling genocide these days? On the main holographic display, President Anya Sharma's face was pale but resolute, broadcast from her own bunker in Geneva. They've sent the same message to every world leader, every military command. The ultimatum is clear. Thorne looked at the satellite feed. A single, impossibly vast Athelian ship hung in high orbit, a sliver of Blindy. In gold and white against the familiar blackness of space. It hadn't so much arrived as appeared. Then so is our answer, Thorne said. He turned to his communications officer, a young lieutenant whose face was a mask of disbelief. Lieutenant, open a planet-wide channel. I want every human being to hear this. Then patch me through directly to their vessel." A moment later, his face was on every screen on Earth, and simultaneously on the main view screen of the Celestial Edict. He stood before the united flag of Earth, his expression grim, his jaw set like granite. "This is Admiral Jax Thorne of the United Earth Defense Command," he said, his voice calm, but with an undercurrent of unyielding steel. "To the Athelian ascendancy. Earth is the sovereign territory of the human race. We recognize no authority but our own. We do not kneel. We do not surrender." He paused, letting the words echo across his own world and out into the void. "You have one standard hour to leave our solar system. If you remain beyond that time, you will be considered a hostile force, and we will respond accordingly." Aboard the Celestial Edict, the Athelian bridge crew was stunned into a collective, silent shock. High Emissary Kalen let out a series of sharp, incredulous chimes that her translator rendered as piercing, high-pitched laughter. Respond? With what? Their chemical rockets? Their little fission bombs? She had expected fear. She had expected begging. At worst, she had expected a confused, terrified silence as their primitive leaders scrambled to comply. She had not expected structured, unified defiance. It was illogical. It was unprecedented. It was profoundly insulting. "They do not comprehend our power," she declared, her voice resonating with cold fury. "They are children who have thrown a rock at the sun. We must educate them on the nature of fire." High above Earth, the Celestial Edict powered its primary purification lance. A beam of focused energy, thin as a needle and bright as a newborn star, shot down from the heavens. It did not strike a city. It struck an empty, lifeless stretch of the Sahara Desert. The sand, the rock, the very bedrock beneath, for 1,000 feet down, was instantly turned to a swirling, incandescent plasma. When the light faded, a perfect circle of obsidian glass, exactly 1 mile in diameter, scarred the face of the Earth. A wound so perfect, so terrible, it could only be artificial. The message was clear. This could have been your cities. The effect was not what Kalen intended. Instead of terror, the act ignited a global firestorm of incandescent rage. Within hours, old rivalries between nations evaporated. Decades of political tension and mistrust vanished as if they had never existed. The sight of that wound upon their shared planet united humanity in a way no human leader, no philosopher, no prophet ever could. President Sharma's voice rang out across the globe. Her words carried on a wave of collective human fury. "We will not kneel. We will not surrender our freedom. If they want our world, they will have to pry it from the ashes of our dead hands." Kalen watched the broadcasts with a growing, unsettling confusion. They saw our power. They know we can unmake their world. Why do they still resist? Why do they choose annihilation? Her sub-emissary, his own confidence shaken, pulled up the historical files again. "High Emissary, our xenologist's initial psychological profile may have been incomplete. It suggests a deeply ingrained, paradoxical instinct. When faced with an existential threat from an outsider, their instinct for internal conflict is completely suppressed. It is rechanneled, transmuted into external aggression. They unify. That is primitive herd behavior." Kalen chimed dismissively. "It is suicidal. It appears," the sub-emissary said, his voice barely a whisper, "to be their most fundamental survival trait." On the golden throne of Ethel, Imperator Forlag, ruler of the Ascendancy for 3,000 years, received Kalen's report with a fury that made the very air in the throne room vibrate. "They refuse ascension," the Imperator's voice boomed, a sound that had humbled civilizations. "A single-world species of chittering primitives dares to defy the edict?" "They do, Imperator. They are unexpectedly stubborn. Stubbornness is a spiritual flaw to be corrected by divine fire," the Imperator declared. "If they will not ascend by choice, they will be purified by force. Send the Third Ascendant Fleet. Lord Admiral Xyrock will command. Let him remind this corner of the galaxy of the price of defiance." The Third Fleet was a force of legend. 50,000 warships, a river of steel and light that had pacified entire star clusters without losing a single vessel. Its commander, Lord Admiral Xyrock, was a veteran of 500 campaigns, a living embodiment of the Ascendancy's military might. As his fleet tore wound through hyperspace toward the Sol system, Xyrock felt a familiar, comfortable boredom. This would be his 501st conquest, and likely his easiest. He was right about one thing. It would be quick, just not in the way he expected. The Third Ascendant Fleet dropped out of hyperspace with divine precision, materializing in a perfect battle formation at the edge of the solar system, near the orbit of the gas giant Jupiter. Xyrock expected to see a terrified blue planet, cowering in the distance. Instead, his ship's advanced sensors screamed a chorus of alarm. "Lord Admiral," his tactical officer shrieked, his disciplined tones cracking with disbelief. "Massive energy signatures. All around us. In the asteroid belt." What Xyrock's long-range scans had dismissed as a band of lifeless, inert rocks came alive. Asteroids the size of mountains cracked open on hidden seams, revealing the glowing interiors of secret shipyards. Sections of the belt unfolded, revealing automated defense platforms and swarms of waiting ships that rose from the dust and shadow like predators. Thousands of them. They were not elegant ships like his own golden vessels. They were brutal, angular things of dark gray metal, covered in weapon ports and thick, ablative armor. They looked less like vessels and more like flying fists, hungry for a fight. "How many?" Xyrock demanded, his composure already fracturing. "Counting. 2,000, 4,000, sir. The count is still rising. They've been building a secret fleet." Aboard the human flagship Defiance, a vessel that looked more like a battering ram with engines, Admiral Thorne watched the Athelian fleet materialize exactly where his strategists had predicted. The trap was sprung. All ships. His voice went out across the newly christened Javelin fleet. "This is Thorne. For 60 years, they watched us. They judged us. Today, we deliver our verdict. Remember the Sahara. Remember London. Remember Moscow. Remember Beijing. For Earth. Attack." The Battle of Jupiter began with the entire human fleet charging directly into the heart of the vastly larger, vastly more powerful Imperial fleet. To Xyrock, it was madness. A suicidal, pointless gesture. He had a 10-to-1 advantage in ships and a 1,000-to-1 advantage in technology and experience. But the humans were not fighting a war of numbers. They were not fighting a war of technology. They were fighting a war of cost, and they were willing to pay any price. The first wave of human destroyers fired every missile and torpedo they had, a massive, unguided volley designed to overwhelm point defense systems. Then, they simply kept going. They didn't turn. They didn't evade. They accelerated. "By the void," Xyrock whispered, his multiple eyes wide with horror as he watched a human ship, its weapons depleted, smash directly into one of his lead cruisers at full ramming speed. The human ship was obliterated into atoms, but the cruiser's divine shields collapsed under the kinetic impact, and its reactor core went critical, exploding and taking 2 nearby frigates with it in a silent, blossoming flower of death. This scene repeated hundreds of times, a symphony of suicidal, tactical insanity. Human pilots, their fighters crippled and leaking plasma, would eject and then detonate their fusion cores as enemy ships moved in to capture the wreckage. Human boarding parties, armed with crude but effective magnetic shotguns, would breach Athelian hulls. When overwhelmed, they would detonate their own armor's microreactors, taking entire sections of the enemy ship with them. General Thax, a veteran strategist assigned to Xyrock's fleet, watched the tactical display and felt something he had never known in 200 campaigns. A cold, intellectual fear. "What manner of species is this?" he murmured. "Their tactics are devoid of all logic, all self-preservation. They seem willing to die, simply to kill us." On the bridge of the destroyer Houston, C. Aptine Eva Rostova was out of torpedoes. Her main railgun melted into slag. Her ship was a dying wreck. "Ramming speed," she ordered, her voice calm amidst the chaos of the dying bridge. "Ma'am, we won't survive impact," her helm officer cried, his hands fighting the controls. "Neither will they," Rostova replied, her eyes fixed on the Athelian battlecruiser ahead, its lance cannon charging to fire on the Defiance. For Earth, the Houston struck the larger ship's midsection, cracking its spine and sending it careening into 2 other vessels, a cosmic game of billiards played with burning ships. The human communication channels were not filled with screams of terror or pleas for help. They were filled with war songs, with guttural battle cries, with pilots calling out the names of their home cities as they died. "Give him hell, Viper. See you in Valhalla, Jackson. This one's for my daughter, you golden bastards." It was as if they saw death in battle not as a tragedy, but as the highest possible honor. After 12 hours of brutal, relentless, insane fighting, Lord Admiral Xyrock, his fleet shattered, his disciplined warriors psychologically broken by the sheer, joyful ferocity of the humans, gave an order no Athelian admiral had ever given in the history of the Ascendancy. He ordered a retreat. The Third Ascendant Fleet, the pride of the Empire, had lost 10,000 ships. 10,000. A full fifth of its strength. The human fleet was all but annihilated, with only a few hundred battered, bleeding vessels still functional. By any sane, logical metric, the Athelians had won a crushing victory. But as Xyrock's crippled ship fled into the cold safety of hyperspace, it did not feel like victory. It felt like he had just kicked open a cage and discovered the creature inside was a monster far greater than himself. The Imperator was incandescent with rage. He had lost a fifth of his fleet to primitives. It was unacceptable. It was humiliating. It was heresy. "Prepare the Second Ascendant Fleet," he roared from his golden throne. 100,000 ships. And activate the World Breaker. I will unmake their moon as a final warning, and then I will salt the ashes of their insignificant world. General Thax, now back on Ethel, tried to intervene, his voice laced with a new, desperate urgency. "Imperator, perhaps we should study these humans more before committing our primary fleet." Their tactics were savagery, the Imperator bellowed. "And we will meet savagery with divine annihilation." 3 months later, the Second Fleet, a force so vast it blotted out the stars, arrived at the edge of the Sol system. Grand Admiral Vor, a ruthless commander known for his utter lack of mercy, was in command. General Thax was aboard the World Breaker as a strategic advisor, his heart heavy with a sense of impending doom. This time, they came prepared for a war against madmen. What they found was a fortress. The entire solar system had been transformed into a perfectly engineered, system-wide kill box. Defense platforms, built with newly reverse-engineered Athelian technology, orbited the sun in complex, interlocking orbits. The asteroid belt was now a self-guided minefield of fusion warheads. Every moon of every gas giant was a fortified gun emplacement, waiting in silent ambush. "They've turned their system into a web," Thax murmured in horror. "A web we shall burn," Grand Admiral Vor sneered. "Target their moon. The Imperator wants a demonstration of our resolve." The World Breaker, the Empire's ultimate weapon, a ship capable of fracturing a planet's crust with a single shot, charged its main cannon. A beam of pure, annihilating energy lanced across space. It never hit. A multi-layered shield network, projected from Earth, Luna, and Mars simultaneously, flared into vibrant, defiant life, absorbing the entire blast. The weapon that could kill worlds had been stopped cold by the ingenuity of a species that should not have even understood the physics behind it. Then came the message from Earth. It was Admiral Thorne again. His voice was colder than the void. "That was your one and only warning." The entire solar system opened fire at once. It was not a battle. It was a perfectly executed, system-wide ambush. Railgun slugs from Earth, faster and larger than before. Plasma volleys from Martian defense grids. Nuclear torpedoes from the asteroid belt that moved with an intelligence of their own. The Second Fleet was dying before it even had a chance to properly fight. They wanted us to come here, Thax realized with a sickening certainty. They wanted us to attack their moon. It was a trigger for the trap. Grand Admiral Vor, seeing his invincible fleet being decimated, screamed, "Signal the retreat. Fall back." But even retreat was a trap. The hyperspace jump points were mined. Fleets of tiny, unseen human drones, stealthy and fast, attached themselves to the engines of retreating ships, disabling them from within. The Second Fleet lost 40,000 ships just trying to escape. General Thax returned to Ethel not as a warrior, but as a scholar of a terrifying new subject, humanity. He sealed himself in the Imperial archives with all the data they had captured from the humans' primitive networks. What he found kept him awake for weeks, staring into the darkness, contemplating the nature of the monster his people had awakened. He presented his findings to a stunned High Council. The holographic display in the chamber, which usually showed glorious victories, now lit up with images of human history. This, Thax began, his voice trembling, was their first world war. They fought in trenches of mud and filth for years, charging into machine guns that shredded them by the thousands. 37 million of their own species dead. He switched the image. Their Second World War. 60 million dead. They firebombed entire cities, deliberately targeting civilian populations to break their will. And then this. The image of a mushroom cloud filled the chamber. They created weapons powered by the hearts of stars and used them on their own kind. Twice. The council was silent, a collective horror settling upon them. We saw their constant internal conflict as a weakness. Thax continued, his voice heavy with despair. We were fools. It was a 10,000-year forge. They have been honing the blade of war since they were climbing trees. They have schools dedicated to its study. They have turned torture into a precise science. They have industrialized genocide against their own kind. They have a concept called total war, where all rules of civilization are abandoned in the name of absolute, unconditional victory. He looked directly at the Imperator, his voice dropping to a desperate plea. We have been at peace for so long. We have forgotten what a true predator looks like. Their history is a manual for systematic horror, a litany of atrocities that they do not hide. They study them. They learn from them. Thax brought up one final, terrifying piece of data. And our intelligence on their population was wrong. They are not a single-planet species. We have found evidence of over 50 hidden colonies, established with technology we did not know they possessed. Their population is not a few billion. He took a deep breath. We are facing over 20 billion humans, spread across the stars, all of whom have been taught from birth that death in battle against an overwhelming foe is the highest possible glory. And we have just declared total war on them. He begged the Imperator. We must sue for peace. Now, before they finish reverse engineering all of our technology, before they decide to come for us. But the Imperator, his pride shattered, his empire humiliated, could see only one path. The ascendancy does not bow to primitives, he roared, his voice shaking the foundations of the throne room. We will assemble every fleet. We will gather the World Breaker and its sister ships. We will unmake their world, even if it costs us half the empire. General Thax bowed his head, his heart cold with the certainty of prophecy. He had studied humanity's history. He knew how this story ended. When a human is pushed into a corner, when their survival is truly at stake, they do not cower. They do not break. They become a mirror, reflecting the hatred shown to them, but magnifying it 1,000 times over. Then may the void have mercy on our souls. Thax whispered to the silent, doomed chamber. For the humans will not.